Welcome to the Nerdstalgic Podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Hello and welcome back to the Nerdstalgic Podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good, as per usual. Now I've got a bit of housekeeping to do before I get on to today's episode. Make sure that you are following me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. I know Elon Musk wants us to call it X, but we all know it's Twitter, so I'm going to call it Twitter. And if you are listening to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It all helps me out immensely. So, welcome back to Spooky Month. This is week 2. Last week I did the 1986 B-movie classic, Critters, which I absolutely loved and adored. If you haven't checked that out, please go back and listen to that episode. I had such a fantastic time with that film, and I really do want to watch the rest of the Critters movies. But I'm jumping ahead to 2 years later. So today's movie we're going to be looking at are Killer Klowns from Outer Space from 1988. Another B-tier horror movie classic. It's proper 80s goodness, this is. I've never seen this film before. Never seen it. This is another one just like Critters that I've always had it recommended to me. I've all these horror fans and circles that I go around. They all tell me it's incredible, that you just have to check it out. So I thought I'd put it on the list. To be honest, it was one of those that I wanted to watch first, but I decided to put Critters first, mainly because I was so hyped up to watch this movie specifically that I didn't want to start off with such a bang, and just in case I didn't like it. I know I will, but this case I don't. I didn't want to be disappointed, so I thought I'd do Critters, and I watched Critters and absolutely overjoyed with that movie. It was absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to watch the rest of them. So I thought, I've had such a fantastic time. I'll bump it up and I'll do Killer Klowns from Outer Space now, and then push what I had decided to do for the second week to week 3. So I'm really, really excited for this movie. Going on to IMDb, time to do my best voiceover impression that I can. So you ready? Here it goes. When a small town is invaded by aliens from outer space who are capturing and killing the town's people, no one takes them seriously. Why? The aliens all look like circus clowns, use weapons that look clown-like, and all have painted-on smiles. Only a few of the young people in the town realize the danger, and of course, no one believes them. Armed with an ice cream truck, they try and rescue their friends. Thank you very much, IMDb. You never disappoint, do you? As for the cast of this movie, I've never heard of anybody in this cast. Maybe you will if you are a hardcore horror fan. I am somewhat of a hardcore fan, but I haven't really watched a lot of these B-tier movies. So if you have and you're disappointed that I don't know any of them, I do apologise. But the cast for this movie are Grant Kramer, who plays Mike Tobacco, which is a fantastic name, Mike Tobacco. Then we have Susanna Sidney, who plays Debbie Stone, John Allen Nelson, who plays Dave Hansen, John Vernon, who plays Curtis Mooney, Michael S. Siegel, who plays Richard Ternese, and then you got Christopher Titus as Bob McReed, also as Chris Titus. And then finally we have Peter Licassi plays Paul Tazari. So that is your cast. As for the movie's production, so the film's original title was simply Killer Klowns, but the filmmakers added the words from outer space to prevent audiences from assuming that the film was a slasher film. Filming took place in the city of Watsonville and at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. The film was Christopher Titus's first role in a motion picture movie. As for any sort of practical effects, the popcorn gun used by the clowns in the film was which included a compressor that would allow the weapon to actually propel popcorn, was the most expensive prop made for the production, costing $7,000 to create and taking 6 weeks to build. The legs of the clown balloon animal dog were correlated in latex by the film's special effects department in order to keep the balloon from popping on the pin needles which covered the ground. While the Chiodo brothers, the people that directed it and wrote it, were well known as special effects artists, much of the special effects work was carried out by other artists, allowing the brothers to focus more on their production duties. However, the brothers did personally construct the miniature set for Clownzilla sequence. Most of the vehicles used in the film were rented and therefore were not allowed to be damaged. 2 cars were accidentally damaged. One was given to the production and was driven off a bridge, although it was only intended to roll a short distance, and the Jeep filled with webbing needed a $3,000 repair after solvent in the webbing damaged the interior. The Chiodo brothers wanted to cast comedian Soupy Sales. I'd never heard of that comedian before. As a security guard killed by the clowns with the acid pies, as he was known for receiving pies in the face on his children's television show Lunch with Soupy Sales. I'm guessing that's an American thing, as being English and born in the late 90s. I have no idea what that is, but if you know what that is, well done. However, the executive producers did not want to allocate funds to pay for Sales' plane ticket to the production, as they felt that audiences would not know who Sales was. Oh, that's most likely true. But then again, I can't say I don't, because again, like I said, late 90s. This was the 80s, so I wouldn't know anyway. Jojo the Clownzilla, the colossal clown who appears at the end of the film, was originally intended to be created using stop-motion animation, but was instead portrayed by Charles Chiodo in a rubber suit. In the film's original final, Deputy Dave dies in an explosion of the clown ship, but this was changed after audiences and test screenings desired a more upbeat ending. 4 molds were made for the main clowns. One was peanut-shaped, another was triangular, circular, and the final shape was an inverted triangle. From the 4 molds, the effects artist produced 2 clown characters from each. Clownzilla had its own mask molded specifically for its appearance. 2 of the masks that were used to create the clowns in the film were repurposed and used to portray trolls in the 1991 film Ernest Scared Stupid. So that's gives you an idea of the production. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to this movie. It was directed by Stephen Chiodo. I'm probably butchering his last name. It was written by Charles and Stephen Chiodo. And from what I've been told, from everybody who I spoke to, it is an 80s horror classic. But you're not here to listen to me babble on about the production. You want to hear my thoughts and feelings. So, without further ado, let's get some pies. Let's throw them in each other's faces. And let's get nuts, shall we? Alright, let's go get nuts. So, I've just finished watching Killer Klowns from Outer Space, and honestly, it was the most ridiculous, silly, fun, entertaining, stupid experience I've ever had, all in the best way possible. Like, I don't mean it in a negative way. That it's all positive. It is one of the most ridiculous movies I've ever seen, but it's meant to be, and I love it for that. I I just had a fantastic time with this film. This is possibly one of the best B-tier horror movies I have ever seen. Now, granted, I haven't seen many. I'm new to the genre, but I do want to see more, because so far with Critters and a few others that I've seen, and with Killer Klowns, this is up there with possibly one of the best B-tier horror movies I've ever seen. Because, you know, it has everything you'd want from not just the 80s and B-tier horror, but you would just want from the genre completely, right? So there's cheesy acting and cheesy dialogue. The dialogue is incredibly silly. You know, like I've written some of it down because it made me laugh. So there's this one scene where you get a security guard. It's near the end of the film, and the clown pulls up in a little clown car, and you have that little clown car gag where one clown gets out, another gets out, then another, and like you just got security guys looking at them like, okay, and then more and more get out, and they all stand there, and he's like, what you want, sort of thing, and they all get pies, like they pull their hands from around their backs, they all got pies, and they point at the pies, and it's one of them sort of silly lines, but it just it made me giggle. Especially how I hear it in my head whenever I read it. So the security guy just looks at him and goes, "What are you gonna do with those pies, boys?" And then they just pie him, and he melts, and it's absolutely fantastic. Or you got Curtis Mooney, which I'm going to talk about Mooney later on, where he goes, where somebody phones up and he goes, "Oh, they took my wife away in a balloon," and Curtis replies, "They took your wife away in a balloon? Well, you don't need the police, pal. You need a psychiatrist." It's incredibly cheesy, really, really silly. Or you have these really bravado, sort of really uh, gruff sort of quotes where you got like again one from Mooney where basically you got the scene where he believes that the whole town's playing a prank on him. Mooney's a very stern sort of character, very sort of serious, very sort of like he hates kids. He just hates young people, and he thinks they're all farts and a complete, nuisance to society. And he thinks everybody's going crazy about clowns. He thinks everybody's playing a prank on him, so he's sitting there trying to tough it out, be like, "Oh, I don't care." And then they made this one thing where he's like, all these phones are ringing. He's not answering. In the end, he goes, "I made it through Korea. I can make it through this bullshit," with a cigar in his mouth, really sort of being tough and tumble. And then sort of a clown appears, and a lot of fun happens after that. But yeah, the acting is, sometimes it's very much overacting. Sometimes the actors are going really trying harder than they need to for the type of film that it is. Then you got some that just phone it in. You can tell that the other actors, like what they're what's coming out of their mouth is not what they actually said. You can tell there's a lot of editing, and like somebody had to dub over certain things. And again, these are not nitpicks, these are not issues, because again, when you watch a B type of movie, you expect this is what makes this genre, from my experience anyway, from what people told me, this makes this genre fun. You want the overacting, you want the cheesy dialogue, you want the silliness, you want the actors to be serious, or you want them to be like they know what kind of film they're in, so they just have fun. You want to you want to go on an adventure with them, you know what I mean, no matter what. If it's like overly gory or it's very silly and comical, you want to be on that adventure with them. You want to have a laugh as well. So you have sort of the cheesy acting and the dialogue, which is top notch and incredible, as well as you've got incredible kills as well. You have the acid pies, as I mentioned with security guard. They throw pies at him, he just pies him, and all of a sudden it cuts back to the clowns, and the clowns are slowly sort of waddling like penguins in a line past this little pile, and it zooms out, and you've got this like steaming pile of cream, which was once a security guard. There probably are names for the clowns. They never mention them in the film, so I never wrote any of them down. And if there are, and you're a fan, I do apologize for not knowing them. But it's one little clown, so they all go past it. They just look at this steaming pile of cream that was once just this sort of mix of cream and flesh, really, that's just melted into the ground. They all walk past him, just looking at it, and then you got this cute little clown, which is another scene as well. Another one of my favourite sort of kills is from this clown as well, where he just walks over with a little cherry, puts it on top, pats the cherry, and just walks away. It's an incredible kill. It's silly, and it works as well because them being clowns, is that they would use pies. They weren't going to use grenades or anything like that. They're going to use a pie. It reminded me a bit of Bugsy Malone, where they tried to tell an act like a gangster sort of story, but without the use of guns. So they used to throw pies, or they'd have I can't remember what the guns were called, but the guns would fire like custard and cream, that sort of thing. If you got splattered in the face, you'd die. And that's what it kind of reminded me of. And I really love Bugsy Malone. So it took me back to that very sort of like silliness side of it. And also made sense because they're clowns as well. The next other one as well, which again, I'll go in a bit more detail into it a bit later in my memorable moments. But there is a scene with this little clown, and he's had an altercation with a couple of bikers, and one biker's like, "What you gonna do? Knock my block off?" And he does. He swings back and decks him right under his chin. Head goes flying off, lands in the dustbin. It's incredibly gory. I love it. and they all just like, and all these other bikers just like crap themselves and run off. Again, it's an incredible kill, but there's loads, and a lot of them you don't even actually see them being killed. Like the clowns are going around putting people into cotton candy cocoons, and whenever you get these cocoons, whenever sort of the heroes of the story find these cocoons and trying to rip them open, the people are starting to basically turn into like a soup, into a gloop. They're melting inside. Whenever you open their faces, they're all red because they're just melting to an acid, to like a like a juice sort of thing. Best like a syrupy sort of juice. Best way to explain it. It was very gory, very visceral, and I love that. As you know, I love gore. But I don't like cheap gore. I like it when there is a need for it. And again, it all makes sense that you would. It being very silly, very that sort of thing, that you would imagine that, yeah, if he was to have a moment where he gets fisticuffs, he's going to hit somebody and it's going to knock their block off. It's funny, it's silly, it's great. And these clowns are very, very creepy. And it works so fantastically. And I'm glad they went to the practical effects, which again takes me on to the next part as well. Outstanding practical effects. The clown creature design is incredible. Like they look, again, maybe you're going to think I'm crazy, but they look cute and harmless, but also very menacing, very creepy, very silly, very much what you want from a monster, clown, alien, beast sort of creature. It works in all bright colors, all very sort of what you'd think of a clown. Big bodies. So we got small ones, big round noses, weird, big, bright, colourful hair with different hairstyles. It all works perfectly. And I was thinking, while I was watching the film, I was just sitting there going, because there's a lot of people that just answer the doorbell, because a lot of, while sort of the heroes are running around trying to convince people that clowns are attacking and are killing people, you have these, what I would like to think as sketches of these clowns interacting with the townsfolk. And there are many moments where, like, you have the clowns knock the door, and there's a girl with like a see-through bra on, so you can see a bit of nipple again. Classic 80s horror. Gotta always have a bit of boobage in it. And they got there one clown, big, really horrible looking clown, like sort of clown. If you'd answer the door now, you'd freak out. But no, he answers it. Oh, pizza! Who ordered pizzas? And then the two clowns pop from one side, and the tiny little clown pops out the pizzas, and then turns to go into cotton candy ball. There's another one where another woman answers the door, and he gives her like a Valentine's Day present. She's like, "Oh, thank you." And then she looks around to her husband. He goes, "Oh, was this your idea?" And then they get killed as well. And it's there's another moment where, like, they're in a pharmacy and the clown's gone in and they're just going around playing with things. They're trying to sniff talcum powder and then sneezing, and like they're just causing a muck, really. They're kind of like children. And I sat there trying to think of, like, why people, like, well, for one, nobody in this town has a peephole to look through the door so to see who's at the door. They're just willy-nilly opening the door. This is obviously the 80s and people just didn't care. But also in the fact, I decided to think of, like, why are none of these people scared of clowns? Why is it that none of these people are actually, why are people approaching them? Why are people just sitting there like it's normal, being like, oh, look, a clown, that's normal. And then it hit me. This is the age before It and Pennywise. And it's this. Well, I think probably by this stage, I think It would already been out the book. But people still love clowns. The whole idea of Ronald McDonald and having clowns at birthday parties and that sort of thing was a normal thing. The people were scared of clowns, but it wasn't sort of the heightened fear that we have today. Well, I say heightened fear today. I guess it wasn't as prevalent. I think people were more trusting of clowns. I think a lot of people grew up with clowns. I know there are friends of mine and family members who grew up and had clown dolls in their room. Now, to me, that's a terrifying prospect and idea, but it was just a normal thing back in the day. So, the idea of clowns walking around the street in full makeup looking like they do, and people just laughing at them and find them funny, is a completely normal thing for the 80s, whereas today you'd be like, why is that guy walking around as a clown? That guy's a psycho. You know what I mean? Because again, clowns aren't as popular. Like the idea of clowns nowadays is very different to how clowns were originally sort of perceived. So again, that's kind of the idea that I had in my head of like, oh, kind of it makes sense why people are approaching these clowns, why people are standing there and watching like this one clown that does hand puppetry really, really well. Cool, hand puppetry, like shadow puppetry, on the wall, and they're all laughing at him, like, oh, funny. Then all of a sudden, he makes his like shadow puppet into like big T-Rex, and the T-Rex shadow comes down, swallows his people whole. He then has them like miniature. It would have been great. Like I know it's the 80s, they probably didn't have the budget or practical effects, but it would have been great if you saw loads of little people in his hands, and he just because then he opens his bag and he puts them in this bag full of popcorn. We learn later that this popcorn are kind of like eggs, I would imagine, because these popcorn things they hatch into tiny little killer clown baby things, but they haven't got a body. It's just like a giant spine with a clown head. And one of the girls actually gets attacked. She gets out of the shower and she gets attacked by these things. She survives, but she gets attacked. And again, absolutely fantastically well done in terms of practical effects and creature designs. I love it, as well as the set designs as well. Again, you've got clowns. They come down. Their spaceship is a big top tent. You're going to imagine that inside this thing, it's going to be a madhouse. It's going to be loads of bright colors. Really over unrealistic handles and knobs and that sort of thing. They're going to have big bright balls on the end of them. He's going to have like halls of mirrors and that sort of thing. You're going to have ball pits, which there is a huge ball pit in one stage, and they're going to use weaponry that is not sort of laser beams or ballistics like what humans use. It's going to be a cotton candy gun that turns you into a cocoon. There's going to be one that puts you inside a giant balloon, and the guy carries you around inside this balloon. They use like a popcorn sort of a shotgun that pelts you full of popcorns, and obviously, as we found out what the popcorns are, the popcorns eventually hatch and turn into these little creatures. That's the kind of thing that you would expect from these creatures, that they would have silly weaponry. Near to the end, where the sort of heroes are trapped inside the spaceship, they're being surrounded by the clowns. They've got funky looking baseball bats and clubs that have got stars on them and big, bright and colourful, and like they look like rubber sort of nails, but the nails aren't like rusted. They look colourful nails, but you can tell they're quite sharp and that sort of thing. Like it very plays into it, as well as the vehicles that they use. They drive around in these little this little car. Obviously, it's big on the inside like a TARDIS, but they drive around these little cars that are well sort of designed to look like what you'd imagine them to look like. They've got this big machine that's like a giant vacuum that they just throw these cotton candy cocoons out the windows, and their clowns are catching them and then putting them into these big giant vacuum, and the clowns are throwing like confetti and tinsel, not tinsel. It's like tinsel, but it's more flatter, less tinsely, basically. I don't know. Point is, they throw a lot of this stuff around, and if they've gone to people's houses, they kind of like TP people's houses and that sort of thing. Just without it being TP, it just used with a lot of like confetti and that sort of thing. And again, it all works into the concept and idea of these being clowns and aliens and being very much advanced. And I love it. I love it for that. So, overall, in terms of 80s B tier horror movie, they tick every single box for me, and I was in awe, and I loved it completely. Sort of for a story sort of breakdown, kind of like Critters, it gets into it sort of straight away, probably a lot quicker than Critters, in a way, in terms of actually getting to the action. Anyway, basically, you got these young people. They go to sort of this mountaintop and they do a thing called parking. I don't think parking is a thing anymore. But back in the 80s, parking was very much a thing where young people would go off, make out, and have a bit of fun as they do. I don't know from experience, never had the opportunity, but that's just what they did in the 80s anyway. So these young people are parking, enjoying life, having fun, enjoying the youth. They see what they think is a shooting star. The rest of them stay, to have their fun, and one lot go off to basically see what the shooting star is. Then at the same stage, we have this old man and his little dog named Pooh. He gets really excited and he goes, "Oh, we're going to be rich. There's going to be loads of people. We got to go find the shooting star." He thinks it's Halley's Comet. So these two different characters, these two lots of characters are following on to the shooting star. They find themselves in the middle of the woods. This old guy with his dog. Again, this movie. It's the only thing that I will actually nitpick of this movie, that it will lose points for me, mainly because I don't like seeing animals, specifically dogs, getting hurt in films. I just can't stand that, So he's walking around with Pooh Bear, and Pooh's right behind him, and there's like a silhouette, like a shadow silhouette of one of the clowns in the background. And the old man walks off a little bit, the dog turns around, barks, and the hole opens up in the side of this big top tent that's landed. And you don't see the clown completely, you see his hands, and he just puts out a net, scoops up the dog, and then pulls the dog in. And I would imagine that they ate and killed the dog. And for that, it loses points for me in that. Even though you don't get to see it, it's just, I know what you're interpreting. I know what you mean, by what's happened to that animal, especially if we don't see the animal for the rest of the film. I know what's happened. You've killed that dog. It's horrible. Can't believe you did it. But then again, the clowns from outer space, horrible monsters. Makes you really want to hate them, but love them at the same time. You love them because they're clowns, they're silly, they're funny, but same thing of like, oh, you killed that dog, I really hate you. The old guy goes ballistic anyway. He freaks out. He tries to get his dog back, and then one of the clowns comes in and basically turns him into a cocoon. And that's kind of where it begins and sort of setting off. And then you have the two of it, the boy and the girl who were parking, have now sort of pulled up. They've gone inside the big top sort of spaceship sort of thing, sort of tent. They find the cocoons, find out what's going on. They freak out, get chased by clowns. They lead the clowns into town, and sort of from there it goes on. And the story, again, it's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be. The whole point of these movies, as I said at the beginning, is the fact of, it's to get into the killing, it's to get into the gore, it's to get into the horror, it's to get into the silliness, into the fun as quick as possible. You don't want to be here setting the scene for ages of like, this is the characters, this is what's going on. Like, you want you want to get going, and it does get going really, really quickly in terms of the killings, the deaths, the cocoons, the clowns being silly. Like, there's one moment where you have Rat is absolutely random. Like, you never understand as to why, but again, this is why I like to think this movie is kind of filled in with sketches, because you do get the main story as well, but there are a lot of these sketch sort of moments where randomly you have this guy's in a park, and again, you have no real understanding of why the guy's there or why he was drawn here. All of a sudden, the camera pans to the next scene, and there's this little sort of I don't know, it's in a park, and it's like I don't know, it's made out of wood. Anyway, basically, there's a lot of music coming from there. So a guy walks over, and there's this little Punch and Judy sort of set, and the guy's got puppets, and the waves at him. The guy's on his own, just ha ha ha, really overacting. You can tell this guy is really trying his best with whatever he's got. He doesn't say anything. He's ha 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 ha. This is silly, looking around like I don't have no friends. I'm just standing around. And they do the little puppets, a little act, and then the one puppet gets up, has one of those little cotton candy guns, turns it to the other puppet, blows the puppet up. The guy's ha ha ha, very funny, ha 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 ha. And then the other puppet in his hand, their eyes change, and it goes really sort of menacing, horrible. And he turns around, points the gun at the guy, and then all of a sudden this clown just appears like that, and just points the gun at the guy, and then turns him into a cotton candy. Again, it's a very odd scene, but it's very silly and very fun. One of these little sketches that caught my eye the most and really sort of have stuck with me. I know I've only just watched it, but it's really sort of one of those moments, because it is probably the only part of this film that I would actually even say is relatively scary or creepy. There's kind of like, it's like a fast food chain. I think it's called the Big Top Burger in the film. And there's people eating burgers and all that. And there's a clown, one of the big clowns, who kind of walks over, sees it, and then it pans back into this family talking. And it really reminded me of It and Pennywise, because this little girl, and she's sitting there eating a burger, and she turns around, and as the camera turns, you've got one of these big clowns just sitting on oh, what are they called now? Those toys in playgrounds that rock back and forth like a rocking horse sort of toy. He's just rocking back and forth on it. He's smiling. He waves at her. She waves back, and then he plays peekaboo. She's doing peekaboo back, and then he kind of looks. He kind of stops rocking. And again, this reminds me of like the Terrifier. If you've never seen Terrifier, I would recommend it, but it's incredibly gory and very visceral. So if you have got a weak stomach, I don't recommend it. But if you have watched Terrifier, you'll understand what I mean now. But he stops rocking, still smiling, and he just looks deadpan. Obviously, these creatures haven't got much of facial expressions anyway. Just looks at like sort of deadpan smile, and just puts his hand out and sort of like does that come here sort of look with his finger. And this little girl, again, where are the parents? The parents are right there, and they're not paying attention. Again, very Pennywise, very sort of Stephen King sort of vibes. And she starts to creep over to the door. He's managed to teleport to where the door is, and behind him he's got this big mallet. And I'm thinking to myself, this girl's going to come out, and he's going to basically like mallet her in the head and just turn her into a pancake, or like she's going to come outside and step onto something, and kind of like those machines at carnivals would test your strength. Or even like if you've seen in Beetlejuice, where Beetlejuice has the two hammers, knocks it down, and the two people go flying up through the house. That's what I kind of thought this was going to happen with this little girl. But as she kind of walks over to the door, she opens the door, she's about to walk out, and the mum comes out of nowhere. It's like she's completely oblivious of this clown. Again, I think it's because it's the 80s and people were more open to the idea of clowns, and because they were at a place called Big Top Burger, she probably just assumed it was a sort of person in a costume pretending to be a clown, because she goes, oh, you can go out play in a minute, you've got to eat your food, and pulls away, and the clown's very, very angry. And at this moment, in my head I had this, like, you don't see anything, but in my head I just had this vision of him going in there, very terrified like and just with his hammer just knocking heads off. Sadly, that doesn't happen in this movie. It would have happened if I wrote this movie. That would have been the scene I would have done. Just him going in with a mallet being like, knocking heads off. But again, that's just me. That's what I would have done. That's not what this movie does. But yeah, as when you have all these little scenes and you add into the main story as well, it's a very fun and exhilarating ride. And again, I don't want to spoil. Not that there is really much in the way of spoilers. And again, there's not really much to spoil at the end either. But when they're in the big top and they're running around, trying to escape from the ship, the ending is quite fun and it's quite silly. It's because, again, it makes no sense, but again, these movies, it doesn't need to make sense. So they have these two other friends that are with them, two crazy blokes, I think called the Valette brothers, I think they're called, and they somehow get away. They get lost and find themselves with two I would say female clowns with big boobs. They're like, oh, you must be Beverly's friends. I think her name's Beverly. To be honest, I forgot the names already of the characters, mainly because I was just so focused on the clowns and what the clowns were doing. But then the camera pisses away, and you think, oh, they've died. That's it. They're going to be eaten. They're falling into a ball pit. They're going to be eaten. And then when the other heroes are stuck, they're being surrounded by all these clowns that basically want to bash their heads in. They come through the wall of this almost, you'd think, impenetrable big top sort of spaceship that happens to have walls that are made out of concrete but not metal. Again, makes no sense, but this is what happens. They come through, they survive. Their clothes are ripped to shreds. They're covered in what are blatantly, obviously, tons of giant lipstick marks all over their face and body. Right, so they've had the time of their lives. They're eating ice cream. They come in to save the day. And as they come in to save the day, they sort of speak through, because they've got a giant clown on the top of their ice cream truck that they like. They're ice cream people, by the way. I forgot to mention that. And they go, oh, I am the all-powerful Jojo, the clown. You listen to me, you let them go. So the clowns listen, they let them go. Then this giant Clownzilla comes down and just kaiju monster and just wrecks havoc and throws this ice cream truck away, like around like a rag doll. It blows up. You think these two people have died, and at the end of the movie, somehow they live there, but they're covered in ice cream. And he's like, how did you live? It's very much like Indiana Jones. It's like, how did you survive? Oh, we got inside of the fridge. Yeah, it's nonsensical, it's stupid, but I love it, and that again, I come back to that point. That's what you want from these type of films, is the silliness. So overall, the story, it gets top marks from me. It does everything it needs to and more. Some sort of standout moments I wanted to mention, of course, Officer Mooney. He's not obviously not my favorite. He made me laugh the most because like you have all these other characters in this. Some of them are overacting. Some of them are taking it sort of. Some of them are not trying to hide, and it is just very sort of silly sort of thing. But they must have told this guy that he was in a serious movie, or just to play it really seriously, because he does. He plays the role very seriously, and you can tell like he generally. It's like he hates everybody. He's like hates any young kid, like hooligans, ruffians. He calls them farts and all that. And there's a moment where when the clown comes into the station, and he's like, "Oh, see, he thinks it's somebody in a costume." He's like, "Well, you really outdone yourself." And then they get flowers, and he squirts him in the face, and I think, "Oh, this like water's going to be acid." No, it's just water. And he squirts him in the face, puts out his cigar. So he's like, "Oh, come at you!" And it gets him, turns him around, puts cuffs on him. As he puts the cuffs on him, the clown's hands fall off. He's like, "What the hell?" And which I love. He gets the other clown, waddles off with hands behind his back, goes around to the door where the cells are, peeked around, kind of give him a look of, "Are you coming?" So obviously Mooney follows him. The clown's standing outside the cell, all sort of prim proper, like, "Come on, I'm ready to go in the cell." And he's like, "All right, that's it. Put your hands up." And the clown puts his hands up. We can tell there's no hands left, and he grows his hands back. And Mooney opens the cell, puts him in. And as Roy does, he gets his he goes, "You're going to rule the day that you ever mess with me." Gets the back of his torch. So these were the old-fashioned metal sort of torches. So these were rock solid and hard. And he tried to bop him on the back of the head. Obviously, it doesn't work. So this clown's turned its head around a full 360. Now he's looking at him. His whole body then turns. Mooney slams the prison door closed. And then this guy's got this like what they call now, those little sort of things that come for that extend, called like we have them at parties. Can't put the name of them things, but gets one of those. He just extends, punches him in the face, and grabs him round the throat, and then pulls him in. And then quickly to the part where you had this other copper who gets back to the station. It's all dark. He goes through the police station. It kind of reminds me of Resident Evil 2, where Leon is going through the station. It's pitch black. He's just got a torch. He's going through. There are footprints all over the walls, all over the floor, big clown boot prints. He goes into the prison cell. There are 2 sacks of cotton candy, because there were two like punk kids that Mooney had arrested the night before that were in the cell with the clown. Obviously, the clowns sort of put them into these little sacks, and you really gross out sort of horror. You get a moment where this like arm comes down in front of the screen, and it's covered in blood, and it's really credible, really well done. So he panics, he leaves, he goes back to like phone for help, and I love this scene, and this is why it really stood out to me, because it's so well done, and I'm not going to do it justice. One of those we're just going to have to watch this movie to really get this scene. But he comes back in, and all of a sudden he's not alone. At the back of the room is this clown that's not facing him. You can only see the back of him. And as he's on the phone, this clown turns around to him. He's on the blower, right? He's on the phone trying to get through. He's noticed that something's behind him, so he's turned around, and his clown's just sitting there. And all of a sudden, he's pulled up Mooney, right? And he's got like 2 little painted cheeks, and you can tell that his bottom of his lip on both sides have been ripped down, and this clown's turned him into a ventriloquist dummy. And he basically goes, I think I'm going to say the guy's name is Davey or David or something like that. I can't remember his name, but he basically goes, this is Mooney talking in a very sort of demonic sort of voice. "Don't worry, David. We only want to kill you." And he just comes in, and it's really creepy, but it's a fantastic scene. and then as he pulls, the clown comes back, and Mooney Puppet comes back. That's what I'm going to call him. He's Mooney Puppet now. You get this really visceral sort of sound where the clown's pulled his hand out of Mooney's back. I can only imagine he was working his spine or something like that. If you ever seen the movie Dead Silence, which I completely hate that movie, I hate it to death. I don't like it. It terrifies me. It's one horror movie I will not watch on my own or with people. I refuse. All right. But you ever seen the movie Dead Silence? You will know what I mean of this scene. You've seen this movie, this sort of seen before in that film. Obviously, that movie does it in a lot more terrifying sort of way, but this film does it in a lot more comical way, but still very creepy, very horrible. And once he takes his hand out of his spine, he just pushes Mooney over. Mooney just falls and he's dead. He is just a sack of flesh, you know, because he hasn't got his puppet master. The clowns let him go, so once he let him go, the puppet Mooney falls to the ground and dead. So that's like a standout sort of scene for me that was just like, whoa, this is incredible, really really well done. The next one is to do with getting well, I was talking about earlier about getting the guy getting his block knocked off. So again, it's another one of these sort of scenes, sketches where you have all these bikers outside of a club. They're all on their bikes, being bikers, sort of thing. And also, out of nowhere, you have this the little tiny one who does the cherry on top. He comes over on his little bicycle, tiny little tricycle, little thing. Comes over, and you can tell he's really proud of it. He's showing off his bike to the bikers, like, look at it, ooh, it's nice, and all these bikers laughing at him. And this one guy, I think his name was Spike. I think the biker's name was Spike. And he looks over to this girl that he's with. He goes, "Oh, watch this." He comes over, and he goes, "Can I ride the bike?" And the little clown doesn't talk. They don't talk in this movie. He just looks at him, really cute, innocent, shakes his head, no, sort of thing. And then he goes, "Can I do the horn?" And he nods his head, and he goes, makes that sort of yes sort of noise. So this guy, a real douche, by the way, picks the bike up, slams it on the ground in front of this little clown, stamps on it, breaks it. He goes, "Oh no, I've broken your bike." And this other guy behind him goes, "Ha ha ha, he should have let him ride his bike." And also, again, great scene, another great kill. The little clown, he jumps off to one side, jumps back. Next thing you hear ding ding from like a boxing bell. He's got boxing gloves on. He's doing the old put him up sort of thing, putting him in the guy's face. They're all laughing at him. And the one guy bends down, this big guy Spike, he bends down. He goes, "What are you going to do? Knock my block off?" And all of a sudden he just, twang, head comes off, flies over, lands in the dustbin. They all freak out. And he's just sitting there going, "Yay!" Sort of like Rocky moment. Like, yay. Again, it's a lot shorter scene than the Mooney Puppet scene, but it's, again, very memorable. It's a fantastic scene. Probably next to the Mooney scene, it's like my other sort of favourite sort of scene. But there are many scenes in this that are just silly, slapstick, great. And again, it all makes sense for them being clowns as well. I don't know if this movie ever got a sequel. I don't think it has. But if it did, I would love to watch it because I would just love more from these clowns, or like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, The Invasion. Just to watch them all invade, and I don't know, it'd be a great sort of thing if they did sequels to this film. Or then again, this film works perfectly as it is, so leave it be. But if they ever did make a sequel, it would have been fantastic to see more of these sort of creatures and their weaponry, and just more sort of slapstick, silly sort of sketches of just seeing how they interact with people and interact with like human things. Um, my overall sort of thoughts of this film, if you couldn't tell, is I absolutely love it. I adore this film. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I can't recommend it enough. Not just if you're a B tier horror sort of fan, but if you just like horror in general, you like cheesy 80s movies. This has the cheese. This is the Coup de Grace, the Wensleydale, the mature cheddar. This is your Gouda. This is like the best you're gonna get in terms of prime quality cheesy horror 80s. Fantastic, love it. I'm just saying words at this point. I'm not even having sentences. I'm just saying fancy words because it's just overly a fantastic fun time, and I enjoyed it, and I could recommend it to everybody and anybody. So that's my overall thoughts. But before we get to sort of wrapping up to the end, one thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to throw a bit of trivia. I wanted, as I was looking at doing a lot of reviews, just reviews in general, not just the horror genre. I thought it'd be fun if I throw in some trivia at the end of about the film and things like that, so people who fans of the film, will enjoy. But also the fact if you've never watched the film, you might find them interesting. So, the $2 million budget went primarily on production costs. The clowns and visual effects were created almost entirely by the filmmakers at very little cost. The scene in which a car is thrown over a cliff was initially intended to be far more spectacular. The car was to fly off the cliff and crash down to the ground. Unfortunately, the sling rope snapped because effects crew members neglected to remove the stoppers from underneath the car's wheels. The result was what we see in the final film. The car slowly tumbles over the edge and becomes caught on a tree and then blows up. Though not a hit when it was in theaters, the film has since become a cult classic and made revenue in action figures, DVDs, and T-shirts. I actually know that for a fact. I have a friend of mine. She works at Spirit Halloween, and she has tons of figures herself. But she has figures. She has a prop replica of the gun that they use to turn people into cotton candy, and it actually works. It makes sounds and it spins around and everything. It's incredible prop. She has T-shirts as well, and I've seen a lot of people wear T-shirts of this movie. So it makes sense that because it's such a cult classic, that a lot of their revenue is still being made through Halloween decorations and sort of merchandise. As John Mazzari returned the Music Master tapes to the studio, people in the accounting and legal department completely dismissed Killer Klowns as being a complete failure that would die a quick death. Mazzari reported, "Well, you don't get it. There are people that will love this movie," which there is. And finally, originally, Clownzilla was supposed to be made with stop-motion animation, but due to production costs and limited time to shoot, they made the suit instead. And I think one of the main writers was actually the person who was in the suit. The first day of recording the music score took place on October 31st, 1988. The iconic Killer Clown March was originally written by John Mazzari for his high school rock band, Crisis. The band members did not like it because the notes of the song spelled out an F major and 7th chord, which they felt sounded too much like jazz. So that is a bit of trivia for people who are fans of it, or people who are new to it and want to check it out and might find it interesting. So yeah, that has been sort of it. My overall thoughts of Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Absolutely fantastic movie. I can't recommend it enough. I love it. And part of me is glad that I watched it early, but also I loved it so much, and because it's again one of the best B tier horror movies that I've seen, I wish I kind of left it at the end, kind of like the coup de grace, sort of the big end to Halloween. But it's okay. You've got it on week 2. I hope what I'm going to look at next week is going to be just as exciting. I think that one, another one I haven't watched is going to be fun. From what I've heard about it, it's another silly one. So I look forward to that. Again, no hints as of yet, because I want it all to be a surprise. But it's going to be another B tier, obviously, and it's going to be fun. Who knows? Is it going to be Killer Klowns from Outer Space? Well, currently, it's Killer Klowns then Critters. So who knows what comes next? If it's going to be any better, or it's going to stay in the 3rd spot. We will see. But that is my thoughts and feelings on this movie. You have been listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast. I've been your host, Luke the Human. Thank you greatly for being here with me. If you'd like to hear more from me, not just horror, but all things nerdy and nostalgia, make sure to follow me on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod. Or you can also find the Nerdstalgic podcast basically on all platforms, anywhere and anywhere that you find podcasts. The only place you won't find me is Apple Podcasts, but apart from that, you'll find me everywhere else. Also, if you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you're not listening on YouTube and you want to subscribe, then just go to YouTube and type in the Nerdstalgic podcast. Make sure you ring that notification bell to be notified whenever I upload an episode. I always upload on YouTube on a Sunday. I upload to the podcast on a Saturday, so you will be hearing this most likely on a Sunday. And yeah, so thank you very, very much for listening. And I can't wait till next week. It's going to be a fun one. So until then, I will see you later. Bye bye.